obviously, the COVID created issues.
In a general business year, I think for most of us, we'll have months where we go, oh, that was a little bit. Maybe I won't get through this in its current guise. Hello and welcome to another edition of the Director First podcast. Today we are going to be having a chat with a recent client of ours to help you guys and girls understand out there sort of what happens in liquidation, what happened to this company, what was that dreaded liquidation like, not what I'm telling you it's like, what a real life director shares, and really how that director feels now as a result of going through an insolvency. So, welcome to the podcast, Adrian. Could you sort of briefly introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your business, what it did, and what sort of happened?
Brilliant. First of all, thank you, Chris, for the invitation. I really do feel honored, and I hope that I can help people as a consequence of the experiences I've been through, and obviously with yourself. So that's my most important thing. Thank you. My business was, ironically, healthcare. So healthcare consultancy, both working as CEOs for three companies, actually, and various consultancy on other healthcare issues. So that was my background. The company was formed, I'm guessing 2015. It was somewhere like that, and was doing very well. So obviously, we'll come to the reasons of what happened as you progress. So thank you very much. How's that?
Yeah, mate, a really, really good introduction. So, obviously, you've come across us guys, but what was the warning signs for you that actually, because listen, in a general business year, I think for most of us, we'll have months where we go, oh, that was a little bit tight. And, I've had numerous occasions in my various careers where I've gone, oh God, I don't think I'm going to make this. And then out of nowhere, you're sort of back on your feet again. The winds turned, the sun started shining again. And obviously, you've done a bit over the years, Adrian. I think we're friends now. I can say it. You've been around the block a bit. You've been in business a long, long time. And I know this is the first time that anything like this has happened to you. So you must have seen trials and tribulations over your career. What was it different about this that made you think, actually, I need to take advice?
I think it's a really good question, because you're right. You have successful careers. You never think that it's going to happen to you. I'll start off with the usual joke. Denial is not just a river in Egypt. Do you know what I mean? And you actually, what you have to do is work out at what point. Now, if you take my position, obviously, the COVID created issues, and a lot of issues for SMEs. Yes, there was a bailout with the COVID loans or business loans, whatever they were called. But, they were just actually delaying the problem. It was actually, so it was a good initiative. And it was an initiative a lot of people had to take, particularly in the SMEs, who were, don't forget, I wasn't an employee. I wasn't getting furlough. I was having to support everything by myself. My complication on top of that, and history will now tell the truth on this, was, of course, NHS, who was one of my biggest clients, was issuing contracts to other people, let's say, and it was very, very difficult to get time with NHS procurement because they had huge problems. And I know that. I worked for the NHS. Then, of course, I decided to diversify, like anyone would do. and think, you take opportunity and say, you know what, we'll diversify. So in my wisdom, I diversified to an Israeli company, not expecting a Middle East war, which at the end of the day, most people would say, it's only going to last a month or two. It's getting worse even today with Syria situation. So at that point, you come to the conclusion, right? I've used up my own private money. You don't want to borrow your way out of trouble. That isn't going to help. And there are people that will lend. But again, it's just creating a pitfall later on. And then you're faced with the inevitability, I need help. And that's probably my answer. And I think at that point, I was lucky. I'm not saying this because you're at the other end of the screen here. I met you, sir. And that was important.
Well, I mean, we'll go into that a little bit. But what I think one of the things that I want to highlight is, you're a director who has, over the many, many years that you've been in business, you've paid into the system. And it was only through, this is not an insolvency due to negligence or mismanagement. It's a culmination of two external things that could not have been helped. And I think it's important for directors to know that is there are sometimes things will happen beyond your control that will cause a business to become insolvent. And like I'm quite vocal about why I'm here. I've been through this. I went through an insolvency. And at the time it was like the worst thing that ever happened. But I don't need to be ashamed of it. It was something that happened in my business career to a degree that was, out of my hands. And you also touched on something else that's interesting that people don't touch on is when things become. I mean, let's aside from these bounce back loans, okay, that they were they were an odd loan because anyone could get them. They were self-certified. That there was no PGs. But in the real world, if your business is in trouble, you will be able to find money. You will be able to find finance. But it's highly likely that finance will come with an eye-watering interest rate that's going to put further pressure on the business's cash flow. But they're also going to ask for a personal guarantee. And that for me, if your business is struggling to meet your obligations, I would be so cautious when it comes to putting further money into the pot. Throwing good money after bad money. It's because I see it so many times where directors will sign these loans thinking that things are going to get better, because that's how we're trained, isn't it? Be positive, think positive, and positive things will happen. And to a degree, I believe in positive thinking. Like I'm a massive, I'm a half glass half full kind of guy. But that actually was a problem to me when I was going through the liquidation, because I'm taught to be positive. I'm taught that I can get through anything. And actually with this stuff, you've got to sometimes accept that, maybe I won't get through this in its current guise.
Well, I think that's right. And most people that run businesses do know what they're doing, right? They understand cash flows. They understand. And I think you make the valid point that, I'm the same as you, Chris. Of course, I'm half full. I've had business deals, I've had acquisitions, I've had mergers. They all come good. But those are market dynamics. When you have global dynamics, whatever those are, COVID being the one that most people in this country have suffered from, they are completely out of your control. And at that point, maybe, if anything, I should have considered it at the time of COVID. But I'm like you. Tomorrow's another day. there'll be another contract, and lo and behold, I get another contract, and then I have a war that negates any cash flow issues. So you can't actually predict. And then I would say to you, the biggest, if I was giving an opinion to people that are listening to this, is at what point do you take the plunge? At what point do you actually sit down and say, you know what, this is not going to work out? And of course, you touched on it. You have to deal with the shame. Is it an embarrassment? The fear? Am I going to be put in prison? Blah, 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 blah. And that's where you need advice. And that's what I'd say to you. And the problem is, and you and I have had this discussion, the internet is full of horror stories. Be careful. It doesn't help. It doesn't help.
I think, and that's actually what links me on to one of my next questions is, how did you feel when you sort of first realized that this business might not survive? And also, what were the biggest fears or concerns during that time?
The first one was, look, like everybody that has created an SME, you know, my company's going. It's a bit like, you know, my baby is no longer mine. You know what I mean? That's a bad figure of speech, but you know what I mean. And I think then you say, but what are we going to do to solve the problem? So then you go through the fears. What are the banks going to say? Now, I was fortunate in one way that I wasn't overloaded with debt. And, you know, one of your great videos, and I urge people to watch it, is director's loans. I didn't have that problem. I was going to lose money, not have to pay money. But once you understand what it is you need to do, then it's a lot easier to deal with. But I'm not going to hide the sleepless nights, the worry. And, you know, it is a very, very difficult and traumatic time, personally. I'm not talking mental health. I don't have that mental health issue. But it is deeply, it's on your mind the whole time.
Yeah. Unfinished business. I you know, for me, I've got a, and I remember there was I'm a bit of a control freak, you know, and there was no control there. There was, and I did what you were talking about. I'm on that internet and I'm thinking, I am a problem solver. I've always got myself out of so many different scrapes. It's a business podcast, so I'll keep them scrapes to myself. But I've always been one of those guys that no matter what's going on, I've always managed to get out of it and look back and think, bloody hell, that was a close one, you know. And so I thought the same with this. And like, if you'd have come into my office, but what happened for me in the December, there was a shock announcement from the government who had sort of pulled these types of subsidies that our business model was heavily reliant on. And what I noticed back then, and this was just a sign of my naivety, is all the big players, the day after, they stopped trading. They literally made everyone redundant. And me, like I say, full of all my years of personal development, was thinking, right, I'm going to get through this. Now, we was tiny fish in this game.
Yeah.
And really, I should have then just followed suit. And if I'd have done that, I'd have had a bit more money in the bank account, but I didn't. I kept and here was another thing, my staff were my friends. So I'm like, oh God, can't let them go before Christmas, all that going on. What will people think of me? And we essentially sat on our arses for 3 months nearly, waiting for something to happen.
Yeah.
That never happened. And it was just that, oh my word. You know, and I didn't really want to accept it. Like, I just thought, and eventually, you know, I'm on the internet, I'm going to figure this out. I'll go and see these insolvency practitioners, and it were awful. Like it was absolutely awful. Just how they made me feel. I was feeling bad enough. I really hadn't tried and engineered any of this. It was like market conditions. I brought the business to my knees, and I've gone out there. I'm walking out of these IP's office thinking, "Oh my God, I'm going to lose my house. I'm going to
Yeah.
prison." And then I'm in paranoia mode, thinking, "Oh, I haven't done anything wrong, by the way," but my head
Yeah.
starts to go, "Oh, Chris, what about that business lunch that was really a piss up? They're definitely going to pick up on that thing." And before I know it, it's like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah,
It just
horrible.
takes over. It takes over. And even if you think about it, because obviously SMEs are the most vulnerable, right? And if you take a pandemic, if you take a COVID, the big businesses will survive because they've got the cash, so they can retract. The small business can't. It's a struggle, and that's why I would say to you, even today, with the SME situation, isn't going to get any better with the latest round of increases, etc., tax increases. So I think the SME, as much as it is the most fantastic way to work because it's your own, it's also the most vulnerable. And I think going back to what you said, you sit on it and you sit on it, something's going to happen. Something, whatever something is. But I think for me, the realization, going back to your question, was, Adrian, it's not going to happen because that Israeli situation is not going to calm down. Despite, the various news reports that there's another peace deal coming, and they never came. So I think it's that realization. And then you get to the crunch. I need to take the plunge. Now, here comes the next trick. It's all doom and gloom if you go out on the open market, as you say. And then you start thinking, I'm going to requote you. I haven't done anything wrong. I have done nothing wrong. And yet I'm going to be absolutely shamed and, tarred and feathered or whatever. And then you realize when you speak and you do the proper research, actually, there is a way to do this. And then you get on to the next part of the conversation, but you have to do it properly. You have to.
What were the sort of steps that you took once you decided that liquidation was what was the best option for? I mean, where did you find us, by the way? First of all,
by chance?
we come
by chance,
okay.
Which is good. And being honest, I thought director first was the right title of a company. Logically, I thought, this makes sense. This is great. Then we had our first initial call, and I think what convinced me, you didn't charge me for the call. It wasn't like, £100 or whatever and then you were available for whatever questions I had. And we had about a lot of questions, but I knew from the beginning that I wanted to do this with you. What I needed to do was understand what it was I wanted to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Listen, absolutely, because most of our clients have never been through this process before. It's like, and that's why these podcasts are so valuable, because we know people watch them that were where you was 3 months ago. Because for me to say, listen, this is how it'll happen, there's a doubt. People can doubt what I can say. They won't doubt what you say. You know, but they'll doubt what I'll say, because ultimately, I gain financially if it goes into a liquidation. And listen, I've got a very sneaky business model. I will give a ton of free advice because I know at some stage, if you have to go for an insolvency, you're going to have to use someone like me. And my hope is I've given that much value with no expectation. Well, maybe a little bit of expectation, but no, nothing's compulsory. You know, nothing's obligated. That's how I win the business. Because, mate, we've had a lot of chats. We've built up a good relationship. You know, and I find that once you, and I mean it in a real, genuine sense, if you get to know your clients or your prospects at that stage and you give them your time and you answer the bloody phone to them, even when you've
Correct.
taken, I've got to get this off my chest, right? A lot of our conversations, was after you'd spent some money with us. You know, some people will do anything they can for you until you've made that payment. And then the customer service goes off like a ski slope. And we're just not like that here. We're a busy firm. We'll always get back to that director, because I want you to tell people about me if you come into contact with them in you know, your business dealings going forward. Because it's true, isn't it? If you have a good experience with someone, you'll tell a few people. If you've had a bad experience with somebody, you will shout it from the bloody rooftops.
Chris, it's people, it's whether it's business, whether it's sales, whatever it is, it's people and people. And I think that's where you get confused in an insolvency, because you think you're dealing with a impersonal legal process, right? Which you probably are, but you need someone to lead you through it. And I think so. I would also say that the advice you gave me told me where to look to understand the difference between CVLs and all the different 4 options. You know, all your material, it's all there. So you can get yourself focused. Then you can focus on cleaning the house, however you want to call it. We have an expression, you know, when you're selling a company, dressing the bride. Same expression, right?
Yeah.
So you actually then have to get your own house in order. Get your accountant on board. Get your HMRC sorted. So that when you do take the plunge, the process will protect you.
I like that, dressing the bride.
And that's how I've done it. If I'm giving advice to people, and my accountants help me, they got me the refund from HMRC to pay you. You know, it's all about people. And that, because you're always struggling, you know, not only have you got to find the money to pay for the insolvency process, you're still worried about the credit card that keeps sending you an email telling you that you're defaulted. You're still worried about ABC. And I think the moment in time, and you and I remember this, I'll never forget it. It was the 27th of November. When you finally get the insolvency practitioner to take over, contact the banks, contact whatever creditors you've got, it is like the whole world has come off your shoulders. Now, it doesn't mean you've walked away, but it just means someone is on your side. Does that make sense? Because I think that's the message I would give to anyone that listens to this. Once you've got over the acceptance that we have a problem, once you've understood what is the solution with the advice that you take from yourself, and then you've got your own house in order ready, then I think you will feel 100 million% better.
I'm with you. And one of the things that you did is you continue to take action.
Yes.
Because I
Yes.
see we directors, like we can sort of get the call and um, let's say there is accounts are out of date a couple of years. There is a worry of an overdrawn loan account. There is a worry of a final picture. And it's a case of, right, you could hit the button here. The problem is there's too many unknowns for my liking. What you really need to do, you've got to get your returns up to date. Let's get a final picture. There's a caveat, right? There are certain times I will tell a director, if you've got no money to do it, don't do it. And I'll tell you when that is. It's when they may have an overdrawn director's loan, but they don't have anything. They have no assets. They're literally they haven't got a pot to what out, or a window to throw it out of. But with most directors, like that dressing the bride, I like that saying. You'll hear me say that again as if it's my own, I'm sure.
It's good.
um, but but getting everything in order, getting it all out on the table, because if we can see everything, we can make a real informed decision. And in insolvency, it's really important that a director is made aware of any problems. And
Yeah.
if there is a problem, how are we going to deal with that? Because we can tell on day one what problems are going to be pretty much. And there can be a solution or certainly ideas of a solution presented very, very early. I see so many people rushing into these things
Well, you
because they're
remember,
desperate to do it.
Chris, you remember one of the very early phone calls. Even before you requested it, I sent you everything. Please, Chris, can you just have a look to see, is there something I'm not seeing? Is there something that's going to be a problem further down the road? And I think that doesn't mean that everyone should be in that position, because I also believe, and I'll say this again for people listening, if there was a problem, I know you would have helped. You may have said, listen, we've got a problem here, but we have this option or we have that option. You wouldn't have just said, oh, no, this is. So I think, they say honesty is the best policy. Maybe that is the way to address this. Don't be ashamed. Whatever the problems are, put them on the table and let the professional people come up with the solution. I think that's the way I've looked at this from the beginning.
You're absolutely right. Directors who try and hide stuff in the hope that it won't be found. What you've got to remember is an insolvency practitioner is a bloodhound for a problem. That is what they're there for. The way I earn my living is to help you find out about those problems and either mitigate those problems. Problems can't be swept under the carpet, okay? But like you say, we've got to deal with them headlong and go, before you appoint a liquidator, if there's a problem, you need to know about it and how it's going to be dealt with. Because if you just appoint a liquidator thinking every liquidator is the same, they all do the same job, I'm just desperate to get my company into liquidation, the problems for a director can arise when they've not checked things. They've just blindly gone in thinking that everybody who calls them an insolvency practitioner is going to be a good one who's going to help them. That could be further from the case. What people don't realize is an insolvency practitioner's role is to represent the creditors of the company. So let's look at this company. You've got Adrian, the director, and you've got the creditors, okay? The insolvency practitioner is not there for Adrian. Don't get me wrong. The ones we work with are really good, lovely, friendly, personable, but they're there for the bloody creditors.
Yeah.
So you've got to understand that dynamic if you're watching this. And again, there are some great firms out there. We're really good, but there are some bloody good firms out there.
But Chris, that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing, because one of the benefits director first, i.e. you, brings is you can fit the client to the right practitioner. because of your contact base. You can fit. So you can say, you know what, this one could be tricky, so I need X.
Yeah.
Or this one could be straightforward, so I need Y. And that was a great comfort to me. I remember saying to you on the phone, Chris, do you know the insolvency practitioner? And you said, yes, I do. Yeah. And Adrian, don't worry. And I never worried after that.
Yeah.
Even though I knew that come the 27th, whenever this day was, I was out of the picture now. I'll be contacting you if I've got a problem. Apart from that, it's my problem. Their problem.
All the insolvency practitioners that I've worked with, we have built our relationships up over years and years.
Yeah.
It's like I do not I mean, I probably get, I just ignore them now, but for years I would have firms getting in contact with me saying, will you give us work, etc., etc. Like, my whole reputation has been built upon doing what I say I'm going to do, and actually what's going to happen is going to happen, right?
Yeah.
And that's gone back years and years. It's because the IPs that I work with are, like I say, they can't sweep problems under the table. They would never do anything to jeopardize their own respective licenses. But the proactive, they're like, okay, right, listen. I mean, yours were really lucky. It was a very straightforward job. Okay, very, very straightforward job. But when there are problems, be it directors' loan accounts or, you know, preference payments that have been made in error, or there is assets to purchase, the key for the director is to make sure, get people to do a bit of work first. You know, find out what the insolvency practitioner's views are on this. You know, if it's an overdrawn loan account, what's your personal financial position? What type of, get a deal done before you make the call. And that's it. Like a director, I think I'm hoping now, you know, this will go out in 2025. When we started this, and I think we started generating work probably in 2017. And your people really, they just went onto Google, they typed in liquidation advice, they went with the first person that they called. I think nowadays people will go to YouTube, they'll go to Trustpilot. They literally, they do not want to. I think buyers are more savvy now, aren't they? They know how to do their due diligence on people, and I hope that stops a lot of problems. And I'm assuming that was probably your journey, wasn't it? You saw us somewhere, but no one should ever jump into bed with the first insolvency person that that they speak to. Right. I tell people to speak to more than one. Like we are not bothered about competition here. You know, if our content just helps you get better deals wherever you're going, that's fine. But sort of what
I was slightly different. I didn't ring any of your competitors, right? Okay. Seriously, I didn't. Now, that wasn't, I didn't know you. I as I say, I found the company, I looked it up, I looked at the Trustpilot things, and then I did what I would always do, is ring you and see what was at the other end. You know what I mean? And from there, it was just a question of funding, financing, getting the accounts finished, getting everything straight. Me asking you loads of questions, which you probably asked 100 times, but that's what you're good at, because all of us, anyone facing this, will have the same questions. You know that, and I know that. And I think from that point, once you get to the beginning of the end of the road, because obviously, as you know, and you've told me, it will take 6 to 9 months to finish everything. So let's say the beginning of the end of the road, at that beginning, your pressure has been taken off your shoulders. And I thank you for that. I think a lot of people are lucky to have you. And I hope they call you or listen, and because there is no shame, actually. It is a legal process, but it just has to be done properly. And whatever skeletons are in the cupboard are coming out. But that shouldn't frighten anyone. Because that just means finding a solution.
Exactly. And when it came to the liquidation process, because that's what everyone dreads, can you walk us through it from your point of view, Adrian? What happened? How did it all come together?
Well, it was interesting because I had the call with the liquidator, and I particularly liked her. I just thought she was very straight with me. And it wasn't a long call. It was a very quick call, more a identity check that you are who you say you are, etc. Right, which you'd expect. Then I got a communication telling me she'd appointed an administrator to manage the case administrator, which again, what you'd expect in any corporate setup. And then the forms arrive, the dreaded forms. And you know what? They arrived, and I thought, you know what, Adrian, just sit down and fill in these forms. Because if you fill them in and send them back, then everything will be fine. So I filled in the forms, sent them back. Now, you don't have the personal chatty relationship, which again, you wouldn't expect, because they're doing, as you say, rightly so, their due diligence as well and completing everything to send out to the banks and all that sort of stuff. And then I got a bit, where are you? And I, was ringing saying, is anything happening? Yes, no problem. And then all the forms come, all the board meeting minutes, everything you need to submit, the appointment letters. And you know what? I signed them all, sent them back, and I said, what a fantastic job these guys did. And I didn't need to hassle them at all. And it took 3 weeks, which is exactly what they said it would take.
And what about the creditors meeting? Have you got any comments about your creditors meeting?
I wasn't involved. They did it all. And I said, she said, no, you don't need to be involved. We'll let you know if there's a problem. And if anybody opposes, we'll let you know. And I haven't even asked for an update because I'm confident enough that everything will take place. So I do believe nobody attended.
No, very common. No one attended. Therefore, you don't need to attend.
No. And then I had a 10-minute meeting with the case administrator just to tell me he was sending me the forms to sign, which was the creditors meeting, the attendance notes, all that. And that was, and then after that, it's just been a complete change in stress levels, if that makes sense. It's just, so you then feel, I don't have a personal relationship with the liquidator, but I don't need to, do I? Because as you say, their job is to do. So that doesn't bother me. I think what I like is it was very efficient once the process started. And here's the real bonus for you. And I could always ring you and say, I haven't heard from these people. And you would say, Adrian, don't worry about it. Just relax. Just go and enjoy the cricket. Just relax. And you were right. So thank you. And then the process is very professional, the communications. And I think it's a bit like, I always have this saying for when you're self-employed, if you have an accountant filing your accounts, they'll always get accepted. For some reason. If you try and do them yourself, it's a lot harder. So I think that would be my same thing on any practitioner. I think the word insolvency does have connotations of failure, but you know what? That is actually not correct, because things happen for various reasons, a variety of reasons, not down to an individual's incompetence or whatever. There are various reasons these things happen. So the word insolvency does sound a bit severe, but now I'm through it, well, the beginning of it, I don't find it so threatening, and that would be my other feedback to people.
And I'm going to sort of elaborate on what you said. It's sort of you're sort of at the beginning of the end with it, so to speak. Is when you appoint a liquidator, guys. The day of appointment, there's normally like two important dates. There's the day that you sign your notices, and 21 days later, there is a creditors meeting, which is where the liquidator formally gets appointed. Now, after that period, a liquidator will take, I mean, on a complex case, it could take years, but generally speaking, it's going to be 12 months between that company going into liquidation and then dissolving off the register. And people go, well, why does it take 12 months, Chris? Quite simply, each liquidator, there's actually only, I think there's less than 1,000 insolvency practitioners that take appointments in the UK today. And if you consider how many their businesses are, it's quite a small number. So during that 12-month period, a report goes into the insolvency service. There is HMRC that needs to be liaised with, Companies House that needs to be liaised with. There needs to be reports sent out to creditors at 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and 12 months. So it's not that a liquidator is spending 12 months looking at your case. It couldn't be further from the truth. It's just that process. Everything in insolvency, sadly, takes time. And the final closure of the company on a small case is going to take about 12 months. Because I always get that question. People ring me, Chris, I'm still in liquidation and it's been 9 months, and it's like, honestly, it will go into dissolved. You've just got to bear with us. Adrian, one of the things I wanted to ask you, a bit of a shameless plug, but what aspects of direct to first service did you find most helpful or reassuring?
Someone picking up the phone. Genuinely. I used to, when I was managing even big corporates, even the big brands, and I used to say to the team, please, could you just ring the person and not just send them an email? Mm-hmm. I used to do that in everyday life, and I'm the CEO, and I'm saying, so I'd go out and I'd say to someone, how did you get on with Hospital X? Oh, I've sent them an email. And I'd say, could you do me a favor? Could you just ring this guy and tell him what you're doing, not send him an email, because he's probably deleted it, etc., etc. So I think that's one. I think your expertise, interpersonal skills, etc., without doubt. And I would just add to your last comment, so we just go back on that for people. The one thing the liquidator does, of course, I said at the beginning of the journey, is they take over the company. So the company is now registered with the insolvency practitioner or the community. So I'm free. I'm not out of the woods, but I'm not directly involved. And I think that's something that happens very quickly. Well, that happened quickly for me. So if you go on Companies House, the company will be registered to the practitioner. So you do get instant relief if you want, in terms of where the communications are. And then I'd come back to you, or director first. You've got people supporting you, Emily. If you've been busy, and you are a busy guy, I warn people, get in, he is busy. Emily's always there to help you with whatever it is you need to do.
Oh, she will love that she's got a shout out on this, Adrian.
Oh, no, she is always there. And as I say, people understand what you want, take the right advice, and just take the plunge. Honestly, it's the right thing to do. And anyone that's listening, I honestly say, and I think most directors know when the time is right.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what your experience is, Chris, but most people that have experience will know I have got to act. And I think that's where the decision-making process comes in.
I think for me, it's like, obviously, this is a service that nobody really wants to use. And what I see with directors is those that are better informed make better decisions. You know, ones that I've spoken to a director for years before. And at the start, it's like, you know what? Yeah, given what you've said, do an email between you and your other director as to why you're continuing to trade. And, and then you hear off them again down the line. Where I find directors making really bad decisions are those that have buried their head in the sand for so long, and they get, like a winding up petition gets presented to them, or there's some real severe legal action, and they pick the phone up and they're just in that, fight or flight mode, and it's like they're
Or
trying
as
to,
I said in the beginning, denial.
yeah.
You do actually retract, don't you? And it's human nature. You're dealing with human beings and human feelings and sensitivities, and but you're right, and that's how the process works. But I think the process needs somebody like you, because you provide the initial thing. When I first spoke to you, and I'd reiterate, if anyone's not spoken to you and they choose to, you never made me feel shame. You never made me feel, a bad person. You just were practical and said, let me have a look and see what we can do, which is
I think
what you wanted to hear as the client. And that's the strength.
What would you advise another business owner who's watching this, who may be facing they don't really know their options, they don't know, what would your message to them be?
The same as we've talked about. Pick up the phone, ask, and then do whatever due diligence makes you comfortable, whatever that is, because different people have different views, etc. And as I say, then make sure the house is in order. And then I would say, do it. A bit like the old Nike ad, do it. You know what I mean? It's all about, at what point do you say yes? And you remember the time I did. I said, Chris, yes, I want to do it now. And then we did all the rest, and that was it. And because that is the moment when everything changes for the better. And I think there are times you can delay these decisions. There are always circumstances. There may be a big contract round the corner. So the decision-making process is different for different circumstances and situations. But if you're thinking about it, at least you could be prepared if that contract doesn't come in, etc., etc. Because none of us actually want to do it. It's just it's the solution that's needed at that time in those circumstances. So no regrets from me. And but you gave me the right advice. And then I kept asking you bizarre questions about this, that, and the other. And then I'll just throw something interesting in, really, nothing to do with it. Then you see the rich and famous people in trouble, right? Whoever they are, the Coronation Street actor, Katie Price, whatever. And you think, Well, how did they get into trouble
Mm.
with millions of pounds? So my problem wasn't so big, was it? Not really. I don't
No,
owe.
mate, yours was. I never go into debt levels on here, but it was comparative. You did everything you
Yeah,
could to get out of the hole.
that's what I'm saying. But you see it, and then you think, um, when you realize that the extreme processes, i.e., the celebrity stuff and the boxers that lose millions of pounds, that is incompetence at times.
Mm.
That's
Yeah,
not what
yeah,
that's not
that,
what we're
that,
dealing with. You're dealing with business owners that just need advice and
well,
guidance actually.
Adrian, I'm going to wrap this up now. So
That's a
I
pleasure.
really appreciate you coming on. Genuinely, mate. Um, yeah, you've been a
I
real
hope
good client.
it helps. Um, and Chris, thank you for everything. We'll stay in touch anyway because we've become, friends. Business is done, and we'll see what happens. But Chris,
We
thank you.
both support terrible football teams. We have
I would do
constant
okay.
disappointment in our lives.
Do you know we're the draw experts in the league, both of us? Did you know that?
I didn't. You know what? I've almost given up. Yeah, you played yesterday, actually, didn't you? I watched a bit of it.
Good result, actually, for us. Anyway, we can't bore people on football teams.
No,
Chris, I want to thank you. I hope I've helped. If anybody wants to talk to me, you can give them my details. I am indebted to you personally. Thank you.
God bless you, mate. Thank you, pal. Bye bye, Adrian.
Have fun.